for you to say that you like Trump in Canada, like that's a bold statement. So, I'm trying to look at all this stuff, dude, as like, there's not this good or bad. There's only where we decide, to place them. But there's one thing for certain, Scott.
Yeah.
Biden is a stooge.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it sounds good.
What's got you down? You all right?
Like I'm not vaccinated.
Okay.
And so my whole thing from
for you.
Yeah, I guess fucking my life is miserable. It's fucking horrible.
I can't imagine.
And I have a small dog sitting company, and I bring in a little bit of other business, like with this third party thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so somebody wanted some dog care, and they said that they had been double vaccinated and just curious if I was too. Right. And I just said, you know what, like they apologized for not asking earlier because we were going back and forth for a couple of days, and finally this happened. I'm like, listen, I don't discriminate when it comes to dog care. That was my answer. Right.
Yeah.
And they go, well, if you're not vaccinated, well, we're probably not going to come for this meet and greet so I could see the dog and all that kind of stuff. And I said, hey, I said, this is nothing personal. This just comes down to like, my ethics. And I just don't want to participate in this type of interaction. So happy holidays, Merry Christmas, whatever it might be. So I just thought that was it. He didn't reply with much like happy holidays to me or whatever.
Of course not.
He's the victim. So
yeah, of course. Well, you're an awful person.
I'm a bad person, right?
Probably all kinds of other pejoratives.
Exactly. And so I get an email from this company saying like, hey, by the way, you don't have to be vaccinated to be able to provide service, but you have to tell them that you're not vaccinated. I'm like, I disagree completely. If they ask me, I can say no, or I can just say that I don't think we're a good fit. I'm not going to leave my conversation off like I did with this one. Hey, Scott, how are you? I'm Jason. And I'm not vaccinated. Like that's fucking stupid.
Well, right? Also, why should you feel the need that? It's like the same requirements as like a pedophile, right? Or like it's just a very, I don't like that. I'm not a fan of that. And I'm in New York, which is, it's starting to, I don't know. We're past the realm of things making sense to me.
Right.
I know that. And I don't know. I have a lot of opinions about the matter, I guess.
Okay, great. Well, let's just get into it.
Yeah.
Because I want this to be like a candid COVID conversation. I have never spoken with Scott Hall before. He is a comedian based out of New York City, also has his own podcast, Scott Hall Podcast. It's badass. It's funny. I love it.
I appreciate that very much. As I love your podcast.
Oh, well, thank you very much. So this is a beautiful marriage of the two right here.
Yes, sir.
And I thought you would be just a great candidate because you're a comedian. I love the way that you speak on things, and maybe it would bring some levity to the conversation that we're having right now. I don't want to ask people's vaccination status, but I'm going to just assume that you are.
I got the non-mRNA one.
Okay.
That's what I did.
And know what the crazy thing is? And I find it's sad a little bit because this is not just an unvaccinated type of oppression thing going on. It's a little bit different when people are vaccinated, because I always find when someone's vaccinated and that comes up in conversation, it's almost like there's a little bit of defensiveness. And I don't think there necessarily has to be. Like if someone wants to get vaccinated, me being an unvaccinated person doesn't make me think that you're silly or stupid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Is that what you got from me?
No.
I just wanted to make it. Well, now I'm curious as to how I'm coming off.
No, but I find that like there's always kind of like an explanation as to why someone did it. And for me personally, like I don't care what somebody does, how they go about it. I don't think that the vaccine should be eradicated from the planet. I mean, even if it was bad for you, that's a person's choice whether or not they want to go get it.
I look at it the exact same way as I look at someone not getting it. It's like, all right, like what's that? It's got nothing to do with me.
Right.
Like I've literally, I don't think ever wondered that when I met somebody, like for my own, other than the fact that like it's become like a weird thing. Like you almost like have to ask when you say hello to somebody, you know, or I mean, it's the topic of almost every conversation when you initially meet like a person for the first time, or there's some kind of indication that you are like a secret, like, I don't know how to explain it. It's like, there'll be conversations where, I know in New York at least, where 2 minutes into them, there'll be some kind of like, oh, these people on the train who just don't wear their masks. And it's like, I know what you're doing. Like I'm not here to ruffle anyone's feathers, and never that. Like, that's not my thing. But also, if you're trying to check to see if I'm like a good person based on how I hate other people for not doing a thing, like, it's a very odd. I just don't like to play that game. It's so, I don't know. I don't understand it.
Yeah, I like that take. Now, see, I wasn't sure exactly where your politics were, which is why I thought this is great. I'm Canadian. You're American. Are you Republican, Democrat, either which way?
Man, I don't think that I believe in the terms as much as I think most people do. I think it's I don't my opinion and kind of is the Republicans. I don't know. I grew up in, let's just say I started getting political over the last 4 years, which I think a lot more people got involved.
Absolutely.
Under the Trump era. And I lived in DC, which is like the second most liberal city in the country. And I'll admittedly say that I kind of like to poke the goat. I'm also a very curious person, so I don't really take things on like face value for the most part. So with all that being said, I wouldn't consider myself a Republican, but I definitely don't consider myself a Democrat. Like, I think
so. The short answer is that you're a centrist.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, that was good.
Well, you have to make make things clear, I feel like, now.
Yeah. Well, so what I want to do, I want to touch on vaccines a little bit later on, vaccination, stuff like that, because we're coming from two different sides. So you had mentioned being in New York City, and that's a hotbed for controversy right here in Canada, at least with parents that are concerned maybe with getting their children vaccinated. Again, something that I think parents should have the choice to do. I'm not a parent. I have nothing to say in regards to what you do with your children. I need to make these things like absolutely clear before I get into them, right?
Yeah.
But there is not a lot of scientific data that backs up any reasoning for vaccinating, the kids in between 5 and 11. They're just typically, they do very well with COVID, and they just mandated right now in New York have to be vaccinated if they want to go to the movies and all that kind of shit.
Yeah, I don't, and I'll say, just to start off, I'm not a doctor, and I don't, or a scientist, or yeah. I'm sorry if I misled you.
Whoa, I thought you were a comedian and no, okay.
Yeah, this is what I chose.
Right.
I went to medical school and I chose it. Yeah. But it becomes, so the children thing is, the evidence I've seen is, of course, COVID is pretty mild, if not almost non-existent in those age groups. Anyone kind of younger.
Are people concerned there, or is it just more kind of go with the flow thing? Because I believe the States is less vaccinated than Canada.
My impression of what's going on in Canada is that you guys don't really have much of a choice.
Yeah.
In the matter.
This is the divide, man, where people will say, well, your choice is that you decided not to get vaccinated. Therefore, whatever happens to you as circumstance that's just your fucking problem. Right.
Yeah.
Like, there's not a lot of sympathy. Now, there's a lot of people that have been vaccinated because they want to travel. A lot of them have had to get vaccinated for work. They want to keep their jobs. I don't hear a lot of people saying that they're doing it for health. Like, that doesn't seem to be the number one reason. Scott, if you and I were playing Family Feud and you said health, that would be like answer 2 or 3 down the board. You're not taking it back to your family.
No, absolutely. Well, I think it's the same here in New York as well, as I think that everyone just kind of expects it. Everyone expects you to be vaccinated. There is no sympathy for people that are unvaccinated. The liberal, I'm trying to do this without like alienating like a whole group of people.
Yeah, listen.
And like also like,
don't worry, I mean? I'm going to be the bad guy no matter what. You're good. You went out and you did the right thing.
Well, I went and I got vaccinated because I had to. I have to. I wouldn't have a job if I didn't.
Okay.
And the reason I do feel strongly about this is because it just doesn't make sense to me. Like, I don't think you should be forcing anyone to do anything. And if health is like the third thing on the list, why is it you can't go to the grocery store? Why is it you're being prevented from you're literally getting fired?
Right. Well, what
like,
they
you're
did,
getting fired from work. I've walked down the street on New York, and I live on the Upper East Side. It's a nice neighborhood, but like, I've seen people on their phone, literally verbatim. On one occasion, I walked by a lady who was on her phone, and she was screaming into her phone, "You tell her to get vaccinated or she's out of a job."
Wow.
Now, to me, the level of evidence as far as how, and again, I'm not a doctor, but how deadly the disease is, how much, and what we know now versus what we knew beforehand,
right,
that doesn't seem warranted. And the anger and the frustration, and I think the misunderstanding of all the information surrounded by all of that seems to be a bigger issue to me than the vaccine and the disease itself.
Right. I agree. And the groceries that you had mentioned, now what they have done in the East Coast around here is that they have given the grocery stores executive power that if they decide that they do not want to serve vaccinated people, they can do exactly that.
Vaccinated or unvaccinated?
Unvaccinated. What did I just say?
If you're vaccinated.
No,
said vaccinated. I was like, good. I was like, good for them, dude.
Yeah, it's about time. No,
Canada's got it right.
If you're unvaccinated,
they're trying to take it back. Yeah.
If you're unvaccinated, you would not be able to do grocery shopping there. And so we have the Charter of Rights, right? We have the Charter. You guys have the Constitution. You guys seem to like live or die on that Constitution. We don't seem to be so big into the laws here. Like that's not something that seems to be as like, it doesn't seem to be as polarized, although there's still a lot of anger that's going on in between.
Well, you guys are nicer. You're just nicer people up there. Isn't that the
well, remember it was
just say sorry about everything. And,
the kids in the hall, it used to be like, Canadians are like Americans just without the guns.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, unfortunately, if you look at places like Australia and stuff, I do think that there is something about America where it's like, there's a thing where people are walking around with signs that say "Come and take it."
Yeah.
If that's 50% of your country, you're probably you're going to get a little pushback on things. And I disagree with the guy I do a political podcast with, and we kind of disagree on the gun thing. But I do think that part of the American culture, and I think what it's founded on, or at least what you're kind of fed, or I don't know what it looks like from the outside perspective. I can't know that, but the patriotism and the freedom stuff is like that's one way to get people very riled up is by taking things from them. Now I will say that I don't know what it looks like from the news out there, but at least in New York, it does not seem to be like, I'm very scared that it's not going to be, it is going to get worse as far as, maybe a social credit score where these vaccination cards are going to require 3 shots, 4 shots, 5 shots before you can do anything. And it seems to be going that way pretty fast, regardless of anybody that has anything to say about it.
Right. And what do you know about Australia?
Well, Australia is insane.
Right.
I mean, they literally have at the moment, like camps for people that are on quarantine. Yeah. They will literally put you in a camp. Like I've seen footage of news down there where people and these are people that are testing negative for COVID. And if you and there's also the CDC has admitted, and I know this is a lot of information, again, not a doctor, but the CDC has admitted.
You are not a doctor. Okay, hold on. One more time.
Yeah.
Scott is not a doctor.
I know I look like a doctor. Yeah. If I get lucky, I'll play one on TV one day.
Yeah, right.
But the CDC has admitted that asymptomatic spread is non-existent. As far as they're concerned. So logically, that doesn't make sense.
Right.
And for a place, and then and at the risk of sounding like an American, you say you bring up the guns and stuff, and it's like, well, I really don't think you could round up Americans and be like, oh, you have COVID, like you're coming to me with this camp for 2 weeks and we're going to feed you elementary school amount of food and keep you locked in a box, even if you're testing negative. Like, even though we have cases of people getting over the disease in 4 or 5 days, that kind of thing with medications you're not allowed to talk about.
Right.
And it's just, it's very scary as an American to see what's going on other places, and also have people here be like, yeah, that's correct. That's how deadly this is.
Yeah.
That's warranted. And I'm like, I don't know where they're getting their information. Sometimes I feel like I'm in the Twilight Zone.
Well, they're not getting it from the news. That's the whole thing. There's people that look at other sources, I find, and they'll be a little bit more well-versed. And then there's people that are just watching mainstream news and they're just not covering a lot of stuff like that. In Australia, I think her name was Haley. I might be wrong, but it was a woman who had just come in contact, like the contact tracing, where she
Mhm.
had come in contact with someone that had COVID. Now, I think there was something else in there as well, to where I don't think she was 100% transparent with the people that she was dealing with in regards to the COVID camps, but they did whisk her away for 2 weeks, and she never tested positive
Can I
for a
also
COVID
just
test.
can I also just say something too? Like if you're being asked questions at the threat of being taken away from your family, your job, whatever, for weeks at a time,
Mm-hmm.
you might not be, you as a like just on a human level, regardless of your politics and everything, so you on a human level might be a little bit apt to not,
Yes.
be fully, and I'm just want to say that, like, but they took her away. Never, no, she never tested
She
positive the
never
entire
tested
time.
positive. She tested negative a number of times while she was there, and they still wouldn't let her go. And that's crazy. So she never even had COVID. So
Yeah.
when now, and that's, it's just bizarre. I'm just seeing a lot of the over the top theatrical stuff when I'm seeing the news. I just don't understand. And it's not to say that, someone's stupid or like, oh, you're just not educated. It really just comes down to opinion, right? Everyone has a different opinion based on a whole bunch of different life circumstances and
Hmm.
and what they're bringing in right now. So generally, when I run into someone that seems to be, very pro narrative, I do find that they watch a lot of news. And actually, and I'm going to throw this out there because I always get a whole bunch of grief that people think that maybe I have a bias, which I do, but I try to call it down the middle. There's nothing that drives me more bananas than when there's someone that leans, I guess, a little bit more to the right, because that's where I get placed anyways,
Yeah.
where
Same.
they share bad information. I
So,
can't
well,
stand that.
yeah. Well, it's because it takes away from. It sucks that we live in a binary system where it's right or left, and it's like, well, I feel like the left is overreacting to this certain situation, so my only resort is to go to the right. And
Mm,
then you go to the right, and they say something crazy, and you're like, well, now I don't know what to do
yeah.
because I can't use this person as an example because they're saying crazy things,
Yeah.
and these people are clearly saying things that don't make sense. So and I found, and I don't know if you found, and I think so because I feel like we maybe are on similar wavelengths just about like what's going on in the country about certain things and just people's perception. But the more I talk about this and have conversations that are just about honesty and about like, let's just look at it from an like just as humans. It's
Hmm.
no labels, no gender, who you voted for, who you want to have sex with, just all the political nonsense aside. And it seems to me like people are yearning for those types of discussions. There's a lot of people in the middle. There's a lot of people that feel politically homeless that they don't, they're getting told. It's hard when you have mainstream news and you're not like a person who has conversations like we do. Like eh, there is something to be said if you look outside of it for having these conversations on a daily basis. It does open your worldview. You stop taking things at face value. But there are people that never do that. Their
Right.
entire life, they've never done that. They don't question things. It's just not something they wanted to do, which is fine. But they live, a 9 to 5, and maybe they have a family to take care of, and maybe they've started their family at a young age, so they've always had this responsibility that's bigger than them. They don't have time. And what they do see is 7, 8 o'clock before they go to bed. They see all these people telling them, you know, that the world's on fire and it's going to end, and this is the bubonic plague. And the only person telling them the opposite is like their buddy at work.
Hmm.
And a lot of these people aren't hip to podcasts yet. If they are, it's probably recommend. It might be an offshoot of the mainstream news. I just feel like it's the narrative is monopolized.
Yeah. I think just the overall severity, and it's not just, again, wanting to be sensitive. We're obviously both wanting to be very sensitive here with this candid conversation. But there is a camp that obviously thinks that this is a lot more dangerous than it is. And
Hmm.
there's a camp that obviously just doesn't think it's that severe. I mean, especially since, you can get through COVID with a sniffle. And on the extreme side of things, people are treating COVID like it's a fucking death sentence. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to get COVID. Believe me. Like, I don't. I believe I have. Like, I got a moderate reaction to COVID,
Hmm.
and definitely felt it in my chest.
Couple days or?
Yeah, a couple of days, and I told people just in case. This was early on, like when it first kind of hit, just, maybe you should stay away from me because I just don't know what this is, which I would generally do anyways if I had a cold or a flu or whatever. I don't want to see anybody. But the thought of getting COVID again, like it doesn't scare me, knowing full well that there is potential that it could kill me.
Can I say something? The CDC just admitted under a Freedom of Information Act that you cannot get COVID again. There's no cases of that happening.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, fucking party on. Let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that? And I just learned that from the Dr. Peter McCullough was just on a podcast I was listening to, and he had some crazy information. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, please. Like go
people
for it.
Should know that.
As long as it's verified. Again, Scott is not a doctor.
Yeah.
So
I do like that. I've had people, I don't know if you get this, but I've had people DM me after listening to the podcast and be like, hey man, I really appreciate you talking about this stuff. You're the only one I trust. And I'm like, that is stupid. Yeah. That's also dumb.
That's a poor decision.
If you knew me, you would not.
That's hilarious. So let's get into our awakenings, right? So Donald Trump, there is something else that you're just kind of not allowed to talk about. People get really upset here in Canada when you talk about Trump.
Isn't that odd?
Yeah.
Because it's not I'm very interested in the perception of America from the Canadian perspective.
Republicans are racists and hicks.
Yeah, that's pretty much.
You know what I mean? Like you have Confederate flags, and
is everybody pretty liberal in Canada? Like, what would you say percentage wise?
You know what? Overall, very liberal. We do have conservatives, but they're not the type of conservatives that you have there. We have like two major parties.
What does that mean?
Well, I'll give you an example. We have the liberals and the conservatives, right?
Yeah.
And then they have they've merged into one kind of with their ideology since COVID came into play, right? You would think that the conservatives here in Canada, they would be like, well, we're pro-choice, and they weren't. They were for the passports. They were for pro-vaccine. And that's what the liberals ran their campaign on. And then we had a newer party. They're called the PPC. And they were the true conservatives, where they were very pro-choice. They were.
And how big are they? Like,
not big.
Yeah, okay.
They got 5% of the vote, right? And they didn't even win a seat in our house.
Yeah.
But they were the only ones that were the conservatives. You guys, it's one or the other. Right. You are either voting for the Republicans or the Democrats, and the Democrats would be the version of what we have for the liberals here for the most part, where it's a lot of emotions. This is what I've learned, generally with liberals, Democrats, it's a little bit more thinking with emotion and causes, things of that nature. And then what would used to be the conservatives here would be, and very much like you, which is pro-choice and, maybe dealing a little bit more with being financially responsible. That kind of stuff. Right. So
awful,
so you were talking about Trump. What was it about Trump that made you much more political? Was it the man himself, or was it everything that was surrounding what was going on within the Trump sphere?
It was always, it's never the man. I'm just, I find that you can learn a lot just by watching people's reactions to things. And very early on, I found Trump hilarious. I mean, absolutely hilarious to watch, because I enjoy debates. I will listen to Christopher Hitchin debates. I will listen to all kinds of Sam Harris, whatever, just anybody talking. And watching Trump debate people was, I mean, you can debate, it's up to you whether you think that's good for politics or world leaders or anything.
Sure.
But it was unbelievably entertaining. And to watch people around me act like, here's something that I never heard said until the news started saying it, is threat to democracy. Do you know what I mean? When I have like a 24-year-old telling me something's a threat to democracy, I'm like, where did you hear that? Like, that didn't come out of your 24-year-old brain. And I don't mean that in any kind of like, it's just, I realized very quickly that that there was going to be one side to this whole thing, and anything that was being done that was, any kind of good, or let's say, there are a lot of Latino voters. Like, there's a big thing about him calling Mexicans racist and immigrants racist, or immigrants rapists and all this other stuff. And so everyone was Latinos hate Trump, blah, 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 blah. And it's just like, that's not the case.
No,
A
not at
lot of
all.
immigrants agreed with his immigration policy.
Hmm.
He had the second term, he got his black votership went up. Like, there's a lot of facts that were being ignored very early on. And that's what made me curious. That's kind of what got me politically involved, where I was like, oh, this is clearly not the truth.
Right.
Like, when things started clearly being misconstrued or left out,
Hmm.
and I was watching people say things without any kind of backing or like any kind of facts behind it, I was like, okay, well, I'm not going
Okay.
to be that guy. Like, I
Here's a
need to.
yes/no question for you.
Yeah,
Do you think there was fraud in the election?
I think there's been fraud in probably every election that's ever
That's
been.
a safe answer. You're such a
I
dick.
know. I know. I mean, in what way? In what way? They
No, well,
verifiably kept Bernie from
right,
winning. So if you want to say that, so I
right.
would say yes. But
Okay.
I also think that if Trump got reelected, I think the United States would probably be on fire right now. There'd probably be some kind of civil war, and I don't think that would be coming
Yeah.
from the Trump side of things.
I
I think
wonder what's
people
going to
couldn't have
happen there.
handled it.
Yeah. See, for me, it's I had my thoughts on Trump as well, and I'm not saying I want to be Trump's best friend. I don't know Trump, and that's the whole thing. I don't talk about politicians like they're my buddies. I don't know what they
Yeah,
do. I don't know how they live. They can either just seem like they're an okay guy or not. I'm not even that invested in it. But when it
yeah.
comes to Trump, he was definitely someone that I read all the headlines, all that kind of stuff. I didn't think he was that great of an individual,
Hmm.
and whatever. And then I kind of saw the lines getting blurred. I think he said something like, I'm going to, you can grab him right by the pussycat. I think
Yeah,
that
yeah,
was something
yeah.
that came out when he was on the campaign trail. And I mean,
That's
like,
safe
listen,
too.
like,
That's
listen,
fine.
like it was definitely a horrible thing to say, right? But I mean, you've been to poker nights. I've been to
Yeah.
poker nights, and the stuff that gets said around that table is a million times worse than anything that Trump said when he was on the campaign trail. But obviously, it's unflattering for a president. I mean, no one
Hmm.
talked about Bill Clinton and the BJ in the Oval Office. That was
Yeah.
okay, because he was cool because he played the sax and all that kind of stuff. But they really kind of held his nuts to the fire. And what I eventually just started doing, for whatever reason, is I said, you know what? I got to give this guy a fair shake. Maybe it was a book that I was reading. And I said, I'm going to start watching his rallies because I have this opinion formed based solely what I'm seeing in media.
So something in your head was like, I just need to be on a human level. I need to give a person
Yes, I'm
a
very much
chance.
like
Yeah.
that too, brother. Human.
Yeah.
Let's just take a look at this from a human perspective.
Yeah. Which is
And
amazing.
it took one rally, and then I watched how the news reported that rally, and
Correct.
it just was not true. Like, he made a joke about, at the time, they were leading the world in vaccinations. And so he made a comment in jest that, oh, well, maybe we should slow down the vaccinations or something of that nature. And then it showed up on the news. Trump says, like, less vaccinations. And it, is he like a great politician? I don't even know what that means. Is he an
Yeah.
entertainer?
A good liar, even.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. He's entertaining. But when I saw that the news wasn't reporting it properly, then I decided to take a little bit of a deeper look. And then the one thing I really told myself, because I'm on a little bit of a tangent here,
No, please.
I remember seeing, independent news channels popping up on the internet. And when I watched them, like, the logos were kind of cheesy and there were people that I
Hmm.
weren't familiar with. So I just totally
Hmm.
dismissed the fact that maybe they would be telling the truth, right? It's just the
Yeah.
logo, the brand that you're used to. And after seeing that they reported it incorrectly and started seeing a lot more of that type of news pop up, and oftentimes stuff that leans a little bit more right, I had to
Yeah.
take a look at myself from a business brain. I have a business background. I'm like, why would all these right leaning independent news stations be popping up if there was no need for it?
Yeah.
Right. And people are always telling me to cover a little bit more of the other side when I talk about my podcast, because I've dealt with people that have been vaccine injured. I'm dealing with people that come on and talk about your civil rights and liberties so they can hold on to their jobs if they're
Yeah. I
being
saw that.
unjustly removed. Right. And so
Hmm.
someone will say, well, why don't you do the other side? I'm like, well, everything else is the other side.
That's the exact same thing I say.
Yeah.
Almost verbatim. But like, do you want me to come on and say this person's bad and and it's good to lock people up and take things. Like, what do you want to hear? You know what the other side is. What you don't know is these things that I'm telling you, that when I tell you, you go, I didn't know that. And it's like, well, then I don't know why people, it's a real shame, you know. I guess just keeping on the thing of Trump is it did something to people where everything is political now. I don't know if that's a function of, if my guess, and this is kind of it's a little bit convoluted, but social media, you know, kind of really popped up under Obama. He was the first president to be doing like Fallon, these late night shows, whatever. And everything was kind of still in its infancy, but you have Trump, and you get a guy who's knows how to do social media, who's also been on the TV and stuff, and a lot of that's campaign manager and stuff like that. But you have him putting up clips of Hillary saying things from years ago, and then you have people who are now savvy to Twitter for the first time, and you had a period where there was a president. So it's the first election where this is going on, where you can pull up things that candidates said 3-4 years ago. You can see Hillary doing an accent in Arkansas, and Kamala saying that she smoked weed, and her dad's like, what are you talking about? Like, and all this, you know, and there's just all this stuff that's in people's faces, and it seems like the only way to get people to vote now is it's gone. I don't know, it's almost become an entertainment thing. You know, it's very entertaining, and the way to entertain people is to get some, like, it ultimately just boiled down to either laughing at something, hating something, or someone telling you like you're kind of a good person.
And
like, I feel like that's I feel like that's the dynamic with everything almost. It's like you either have to hate this or you're a good person if this is your opinion. If you don't think this, you're a bad person. Or you can be in the middle, and if you're in the middle, the only way to stay sane is be like, this is nuts. Like, I don't know.
Well, we're living in this world where the left is the right.
Yeah,
the left is just right. That's the truth. Do you know what I mean? Like the left is the truth. And if you don't buy solely into that left, there's something wrong with you. Like you're a conspiracy theorist or whatever it might be. Like I was a rational, well-liked individual before COVID ever happened. Now
I can't say the same, but
now that I speak out against the narrative a little bit, like I'm a fucking idiot. Like it's like I'm a conspiracy wacko. Like I've just lost all common sense. And you know, with Trump, the hard thing is before coronavirus, like Trump was on Comedy Central's fucking roasts and, you know, giving money away to charity. And, you know, he was joking about being the president, or, you know, always teasing that he's going to be president, everyone having a laugh about that.
And he was in rap videos and people wrote songs about him, and he got awards from the NAACP.
And he was obviously very well respected just within the pop culture community because he represented billion-dollar brands. So he was a likable individual, and no one talked about how he was a racist then. Why would a racist be the face of all these different brands, especially fried chicken? You fucking kidding me? Like, you can't have a racist like fried chicken. and now, like especially in Canada, like, I mean, for you to say that you like Trump in Canada, like that's a bold statement. I'm not going to say I like or dislike. What I can say is that there's a lot of stuff that floats around the Trump atmosphere that is not true or exacerbated, you know, embellished, and a lot of the good things that he accomplished got swept under the rug. So, you know, I'm trying to look at all this stuff, dude, as like there's not this good or bad. There's only where we decide, you know, place them. But there's one thing for certain, Scott.
Yeah.
Biden is a stooge.
Yeah, of course. He can't speak. It makes no sense. I was just gonna ask you if, I mean, it's blatant. I would just say the Washington Post just wrote an article that says, and it's an opinion piece about how they think that Biden is treated worse in the media than Trump.
What?
I mean, I can't. That's the headline.
Yeah.
And I cannot believe that I can't believe someone would write that, because that is so on its face ridiculous. Yeah. But Biden, I don't. I think that's where I lost a lot of people in DC. Was around the election. I'd never tried to make the argument for Trump because I think that's very hard to do. I think he makes it hard to do. But the case against Biden I mean, pretty rock solid. I was like, I was just telling him, I was like, this is your guy? Like, this is the guy you think, like, people were making them this
Yeah.
like infatuation with like, we're all going to be walking around with football jerseys with governors' names on the back of it soon. Like,
Mm-hmm.
people had their Facebook profile pictures with Biden and Kamala together, and Biden, I'm like, you just spent a summer marching for rights, and now you're gonna make everybody vote for the guy who wrote the drug law, and this girl who used to like, this woman who used to like, she would keep people, she's kept people on death row
Mm-hmm. Right.
to maintain her conviction rate. And these are not, I'm not bashing, these are just facts. And it just seems to fly in the face of everything that people said was important to them during the Trump era. And it was
Right.
like, that's very odd. That goes by the wayside when it's your political party.
Yeah.
You
He's
know?
definitely in decline. Like 4 or 5 years ago, when he was vice president, he seemed like he was there.
Yeah. You
You know
can
what I
go back
mean?
to the campaign. You can go back months,
Mm-hmm.
I think, and see it's very evident. I mean, at this point in his presidency, Obama had given, I think, 151 interviews, 130 interviews. Biden has done, I think, 10.
Right. Yeah.
So, and this is the age of social media and the internet. Like, and I just say all that, and these are just things that I hear and I know, and I have to sit with them in my brain. So then I come on a podcast, much like you, and I just say them, and I go, I don't know
Right.
what to do with it.
Yeah.
You do something with it. And then I
Yeah.
have people go, I don't know what to do with it either. And I'm like, all right, well, we can all hang out and not understand all this together.
Right. Just share. Just
Well,
share.
it's weird. And it seems like the more you find out, the less things make sense.
Mm-hmm. And that's always been the thing that I've spoken of, and people that feel the way that I do speak of is just like, is there not enough information that you've seen, conflicting information, or things that
Mm.
don't make sense, to where you're going to scratch your head and at the very least just kind of like question it a little bit more? Not to say that anything needs questioning, but to feel so strongly about something that has had as many left and right turns as this has had, I'm just
Yeah.
surprised more people aren't like, okay, well, you know what? I'm not going to die on this hill. I still think everyone should get vaccinated, but I'm not going to die on this hill. And I think people should have their choice, opposed to what I think is, the stark reality that if things were to stay this way and get worse for people that are mandated, I think,
Which it will. It's not going to stop. It's not just going,
right.
not, they're not one day just going to be like, all right, everyone go back to normal.
But
Like,
people are okay with it, or they're not okay with it enough to where they're going to intervene.
I was just about to ask if you've ever, and this is, I do this all day, but I was just going to ask if you've ever pondered like what it is about these just humans that are makes them not curious. It makes them not want to, this thing
God.
is, it's right here. And people seem to be, they have blinder. They just seem to intentionally looking the other way.
Mm-hmm.
And I have theories, but I don't know.
Right. I think it comes down to, number one, there's so much stuff on like the far right
Yeah.
that they just don't even want to fucking listen. They've
Yeah.
ruined it for you. Know what I mean? Like, I say this all the time in regards to, I'm trying to connect with people like somewhere in the middle, just
Yeah.
with like, I don't think I should be oppressed. Right now,
Yeah.
I just want to sit down in a fucking store and eat a sandwich.
Correct.
I cannot waste my time right now talking about Bill Gates, like having the most farmland and
Oh
nanobots
man.
and all this
I
kind
like that kind of talk. I like that.
And whether or not this is going to be like, a mass depopulation, like, fuck, if it is, we're done anyways. I just want to have a sandwich in this lifetime. I want to be able to travel. I don't want to be held hostage in my country. Did you know that if you're unvaccinated in Canada, you cannot leave Canada? I cannot leave this country.
That seems like a privilege to people in Australia.
Yeah.
You're not getting put in a cage. Not yet. You're not getting put in a cage.
Yet, but apparently there's a lot of people that say stuff like that is kind of on the way. These internment camps or whatever they call them.
I remember those. Who?
The
I've heard that before.
Same with like the Fauci, the leaked emails, whether or not you want to, put any truth into that. There's also, this was from a wet market, when the reality is, I mean, Fauci, for the most part, it looks like he knew it was man-made, right? We knew that it came from a lab. And then I wonder, like, man, like when this whole thing just happened, it would have been easy to say, hey, listen, we made this, and then take the proper action once that happened. But instead it was, okay, this is out, it's story time. And, and then there was this false narrative. And then it seems like, and I'll give a little bit of grace to the powers that be, like the CDC and the WHO, that this is something that's ever evolving and it's changing. So some of their things are going to evolve and change. But then we kind of find out how some of these deaths are being counted, and they say, no, not so many people died here. Yeah, you should wear a mask. No, you should wear a mask. We've all seen the video with Fauci saying, absolutely, you don't need to wear a mask. And he's like, absolutely, you should wear 20.
Yeah. And then back to 1. And then,
yeah,
there's just, you find out this information, and it's very concerning, and it's very confusing. Like masks, like they present, like if you blow out even a surgical mask, one that's not, there's N95s, but then 20% of that air, 18% of the air is getting out. It prevents things that are 3 microbes. COVID is 1 microbe. There are things that do not, you learn this stuff and you keep researching and none of it makes
right.
Anything.
That maybe it's not as effective as a lot of people think. It offers a layer of protection to some degree, right?
Correct.
I mean,
my point is, and it's not even that, like, and this is where I think sometimes people on the right, or I try not to lose people, is when you say this stuff, it's like, I'm not saying that you should never wear a mask. I'm not saying you shouldn't get vaccinated. I'm saying there shouldn't be a mass hysteria over something that there's a 99% chance of. And also how viruses work is they can become more contagious and less deadly. That's how they work. The first death was just reported of the new variant of Omicron. First death, and it was with Omicron. And I just say all that to be like, it's hard to not know all that stuff and at least be like, well, why is the guy on the TV telling me we're all going to die?
Yeah.
It's
it's this constant perpetual, like, wheel of fear.
Keep going on tangents, but
this is what you're here for, right?
I appreciate that, but it's happening so fast, and in a place like, it worries me, because we're in New York City, and it's New York City. It's America. It's New York City.
Yeah.
And I see, and we're turning in. I mean, I literally, if I go to Lenwich to get a sandwich, I have to pull out my phone and show a piece of paper that says I got a shot before I'm allowed to eat a sandwich. I find that insane.
Right.
I find that very crazy, especially, and I have to wear a mask when I walk in, but once I get to the table, I can take it off, and I have to sit a foot away from 5 other people that I don't know. And so that I cannot.
No, it doesn't make sense. It does not make sense.
I can't pretend like that makes sense to me.
But that's the whole thing. I think, like, our brain, like, we try to make sense of that shit, and that's what's so frustrating. It's like you're just doing everything you can in your brain to try to make this make sense so you don't feel so stupid. I'm in the mall the other day. Like, in the mall, you're supposed to wear your mask everywhere you go, just like anywhere else.
Outside?
When you're in the mall, like, you can be outside of the stores, but walking in the mall halls, you still have to be wearing a mask.
How are they about, I don't mean to interrupt, but how are they about how people wear their masks outside in Canada? Like outdoors?
We'll get into that.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry. All right. So you're in the mall?
I'm in the mall. And, you can sit down kind of like in the mall hallway, let's say at the coffee shop, if they extend the tables and the chairs out into that mall hallway, and you can sit there without your mask, yet you can't walk through that hallway without your mask on. It's like just bizarre. And
if you're go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say this, sitting and standing. It's like, please, someone explain that to me. Just someone please explain that to me. I said that to my friend, like, I when I was in DC very early on, and I'll give credit to people that were, early on I'm admittedly, I enjoy chaos. I don't like people getting sick. I don't like people getting hurt. I don't want to see anyone die. I do like when people are kind of, I like things. I like, it's excitable. There are things, like, things are going on. Like, I don't know, but so everyone was kind of freaking out when it first happened, but kind of once the mask thing had kind of, there'd been the flip flop and people were kind of like, all right, well, the outside is probably fine and whatever. I was paddleboarding with some people, and I've told this story multiple times, but I was paddleboarding with some people, and we had our masks in our pocket. We fell in whatever in the Potomac River in DC. There are bodies in that river. It's disgusting. It's horrible. It's not like there's trash. Like it's not good. We start walking to dinner, maybe 3 blocks away the entire time outside. And one of the young ladies I'm with puts her mask on, covered in this water, and is looking, and not, wring it out. I don't know, maybe it's dry by then. But she's asking me why I'm not putting mine on. It was just in the Potomac River.
In an open body of water.
In an open body of water where they've found bodies. They have not found all the bodies. I can promise you they haven't found all.
Right.
God knows what else. I peed while we were there.
Right.
And then, and I'm the crazy one.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we're also outside in the sun. It's like been proven, like, and
I see that kind of hysteria here too.
But you say something to someone like that, and I get like goat eyes. Mm-hmm. It's just like there is no response. There is just like, okay, well, that person must be an asshole. And it's like, why?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make sense.
Right.
And that's when I get like a little, I don't know, not irritated, but definitely excitable. I just go explain it. Like, someone explain to me what you're doing, like how sitting down and not wearing a mask is different than standing up in the exact same place and wearing it. Yes. Explain to me these rules. And nobody can. They just go, well, you should do it because whatever. And I go, well, I don't do things like that. I just, it's not good, because what that leads to is people fighting each other. And that's at the end of the day, if I can say anything about any of this, is that like, it is really turning people against each other. It is very much turning people against each other. And that is an awful, awful thing.
And that's
media. I really
media.
don't like that.
That is media. That is media. And then, I mean, know what we do is that we take media and then we echo it. And it just keeps on going on and on and on. I think as a whole, it's really important that we start focusing on treating one another a little bit better. I just think it's so horrible. Like just the lack of listening, the lack of effective listening. Feel however you want to feel. And I'm not doing this podcast right now to change anybody's mind. Right. But I think it's important that people listen and then, maybe just kind of hear the other side and have a greater understanding, some empathy. And then you can feel the way that you do. Like, I understand why people that are super paranoid and scared of this is because that's what they're told. So I understand that. So I try not to get upset. I understand why they feel the way that they do. What I find is that it doesn't seem to come full circle back around to me, to where, I'm not one to send a bunch of videos and things of that nature. I just don't bother people with it. But when it's time for me to maybe share a little bit of information that I'd like them to watch, just so they can understand where I'm coming from a little bit more, like that's a no-go. Like that's a no-fly zone.
Really?
And it goes both ways.
What happens? Have you had people respond poorly to you trying to open
with my
their
podcast,
eyes, man?
I get some grief. I like I said, I don't make these to necessarily change somebody's mind. I try to do it in a fashion to where maybe somebody will listen to me where they wouldn't listen to the other person.
Yeah.
I do my best to try to come from a rational place and be impartial and not to make anyone feel excluded. I have friends that are vaccinated. I have friends that are unvaccinated. I have lost very few friends. One good friend that I lost, his wife is compromised and he won't even go for a walk with me. And this is where I start to get a little bit of upset, because I know where that came from. That came from the news. That's misinforming my friend to where now 20 years of friendship is in jeopardy, because this is not going to change anytime soon. They just put $1 billion into this, this passport. So it's probably going to be here for a little bit, but he won't go for a walk with me outside. We hung out together before there were vaccinations available. Right. But he won't now. And here's where the misconception is. And you want to talk about misinformation, is that, the news isn't going to any extent to try to lay down the lowest common denominator of what is safe. They just always tell you what's dangerous. My friend shouldn't be afraid to go for a walk with me outside, whatever. 2 meters apart. I'll play whatever role. I've been in my own house and worn a fucking mask because one of my friends was uncomfortable in my own home, right? Because I want them to feel safe. And he's afraid of bringing COVID home to his wife and making her sick, which I understand.
Yeah, reasonable.
He loves his wife. I mean, he adores her. But they go to restaurants together.
Like if he didn't like her, it'd be fine.
Yeah, maybe, right? That's a good way to get rid of her. I'm sure it's being done right now. People trying to get COVID as badly as possible and bring it home to the spouse they don't like.
Oh, for sure.
But they'll go to restaurants, and here in Ontario, at least, your server or your cook may not be vaccinated.
He won't go out with you because you're not vaccinated.
Right. He won't go for a walk with me because I'm not vaccinated, but he'll go to the restaurant where the server or the cook might be unvaccinated, or where the hostess might be unvaccinated. And let's just throw it out there. Like, the obvious is that everybody can give COVID to another person. So if you're really worried about making anybody sick, if it was that big of a deal, you're not going to concerts, you're not going to restaurants, you're keeping your circle small because, anyone is wearing the bomb. You don't know. Especially asymptomatic. If someone is, you can make the argument. I've been trying to get a doctor on my show, Scott, for a while to talk about this, to talk about why people shouldn't be vaccine hesitant. Like, take the floor and I'll allow my platform for you to reach out to that one person that maybe isn't getting vaccinated for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, because they think it's a microchip or some kind of nonsense.
Whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Now, I also want to ask you some questions, and I'll throw it out there. And if someone can answer this for me, like, feel free. If there were two versions of me, one that was vaccinated and one that wasn't, okay? The one that's me right now that's under the mandates. Let's say mandates just don't even exist, but I keep a small circle. I kind of keep to myself. I eat well, I pump iron, I do all that kind of stuff, right?
This guy.
I take care of myself.
Yeah.
And then there's the other version of me, right? That is vaccinated, but I go to all the concerts, I go to all the hockey games because we're Canadian. Right. Or the football games, like we have like 100,000 people in a goddamn bowl. That's bananas.
Which is happening.
Like, these things are happening, and going to the restaurants, yada, yada, yada. And now one of us has to take care of grandma. Which person do you want that to be?
Oh, that's a good question.
Right.
I didn't think that's where you were going with that.
No, that's where I'm going with it. The reality is that person, the me that has a massive social circle, poses a much greater risk to grandma than I do. And one step further, if grandma's vaccinated, like, it shouldn't even matter.
Correct.
But for whatever reason, this does not seem to make sense on this planet right now. Like, that's not the overwhelming, opinion of most.
I wonder, where do you think, I'm trying to figure out where people draw the line. Because it's like, you say something like that, right? And I've tried to talk to people about it all the time, and because I can't help it. But as far as explaining, that if you have the vaccine, you can still catch and spread COVID, and also about it's only really made for one spike protein, so one variant, and not even that whole So these other variants, it not necessarily effective for. And it's like, I don't know. Like, when are we gonna? People are acting like herd immunity isn't like a thing. Like, okay, what about the people who got COVID?
Right.
So, at what point do you say that to someone? And that's, again, not an argument against anything, but it might be nice to know. You might be less afraid, again, to go to a walk with your friend if you know that his antibodies are stronger than yours.
Right. Well, I mean,
that would
especially
logically
for me,
make sense.
Right. Like, I mean, for number one, just from a cost cutting perspective, right? If I've already had COVID, why would I go get another shot? Right. Like, that really just doesn't make any sense. Like, I just put oil in my car. Like, I'm not going to go in the next day and get more oil in my car. Like, I've been serviced. So for me, it would be great if they would recognize natural immunity. I just don't understand why we're getting away from testing. Like, here in Canada, they just don't want to test. It just seems like they want to get everybody. It started off where I think they wanted to get 70%, then it went up to 80%, and now all of a sudden it's 100%. And I don't even understand the rationale to that, because within any type of scientific model, there's always like these variables. Like it's never going to be 100%.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to get
Correct.
100%, that means like there must be a dictatorship in play. That's the only way you're going to get 100%. And then,
Well,
this whole thing in regards to, what choices, I would argue that we're being given ultimatums opposed to be given choice. Like a choice means
you're
like
definitely not getting choices. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that we can still disagree on whether or not you think I should get vaccinated or not, or that's fine. It's the fact that because you feel that way or that you're very pro-vaccine doesn't mean that you can't not accept like some other narratives within the scope, like underneath the coronavirus umbrella, that you can still disagree with some of the stuff that's going on and still be very strong in your beliefs as a whole that everyone should just kind of go out and do the right thing.
Well, you can't though. You can't. That again, I think the division, I don't, it's so hard to say that there's some kind of like ultimate goal with all of this. And that's probably not a good way to look at it. Like there's some kind of, grand, but they changed, the divisiveness is going to get bad when they're doing things like they like literally changed the definition. And I think Webster's dictionary of anti-vaxxer to people that disagree with mandates.
I heard that. I haven't verified it.
If you disagree with mandates, you're an anti-vaxxer. And so I don't someone can verify that. I don't fact check right now.
He's not a doctor.
I'm not a doctor. Correct. Yeah. But I can read kind of.
There are people that have been vaccinated though and injured by vaccine and then said that they've been injured by vaccine and then they get labeled anti-vaxxers, like my friend Kevin.
Yeah, I saw part of that as well. Also, Eric Clapton, pretty famous guy.
Right.
Too, same thing.
Oh, they're hating on Eric.
Yeah. But I don't understand. And at a point I made, and this is maybe a little bit more political, but it was the first thing I started pointing out was like all these people in DC who are very like Bernie, very anti-big pharma are now walking around with Pfizer t-shirts on. And I'm like, this is the most, like, you guys are hilarious. Like it's I don't know. It's a very weird, strange time. And it's, I guess it's confusing to me, the people that seem to have the most vitriol and anger for everything that's happened, the most anger towards the people who are doing whatever the opposite seem to be the people who have done the least amount of personal research. It seems the people who are just being told this is the right thing to do are the ones that are most willing to vilify anyone who's not, who are not just blindly.
Well, this is what is bananas to me, is that cancer destroys North America. Heart disease, heart attack, stroke destroys. And you know what? Like there's no surge of people jumping on fucking treadmills.
Yeah.
Right. And that's going to knock out like 50 to 70% of people for the most part. Like one of those two things, like generally that's what you're going to die from. One of those two things. So should you not be doing everything, within your arsenal of health to, make sure that your immune system is as strong as possible? So COVID's not going to be a big deal for you regardless, or at least less of a big deal, because there's definitely some healthy people dying of COVID. Right.
Yeah,
but the reality is that they're old and they're out of shape. That's the majority.
Unbelievable majority. 80-90% of hospitalizations.
Right. And funny that you're talking about the Pfizer shirt too, is like whatever happened to the pro-choice debate that was really big in regards to like abortion in America? Because that's the one thing. Choice. Yeah, especially when it came to abortion. Like, it was pro-choice and now like a lot of those people have even flip-flopped, don't you find? They have here.
They flip on the abortion on that particular argument.
There are people that would be pro-choice for abortion, but they're not pro-choice for the vaccine.
Well, they're under the misconception that this is a which seems to be a term that's coined by the media, but a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
Right, that narrative, I can't stand it.
So and again, convoluted things, but with social media, we've become so accustomed to getting our information in 2-sentence in 2 sentence, whether it's a Twitter post or some kind of weird infographic on Instagram that gives you everything that you need to know in a tight little piece of information. It doesn't require you to, read an article and all that. So you hear these phrases like pandemic of the unvaccinated, and because that's how you get all kinds of information, not just news, but entertainment stuff, everything's very quick and fast, and so someone says one thing like that and it's a catchy pandemic of the unvaccinated and it sounds good and it others, so you get to point at people and you're not those people. And it's not my fault that this is happening. It's those people that are happening, regardless of any information. It's like, well, of course that's going to take off. People like to say that. And it's like, yeah, if you think that and people are constantly saying that to you, you're going to vilify, like, it's odd.
Yeah. So how has COVID changed your comedy? Because obviously you being a comedian and not a doctor.
Not yet.
Yeah, you're working
maybe by
on
the end of this conversation.
Yeah, doctor of good jokes. Oh, that's
Yeah.
horrible.
Boom.
Sorry, I would just got
No, it's
booed right
fine.
off stage.
Yeah, you're all right. I've heard worse.
All right. So what is it like? I mean, have you changed your routines at all, or have you been working on jokes when it comes to COVID, or is it just something you just don't think will fly, especially in this marketplace, like you're being in New York City?
Yeah, in DC, it wasn't, the people were not a fan
Okay.
of it. But when I started off, I started doing stand-up. I was successful in the restaurant business and I quit. I was like a regional manager. I did very well. And I stopped, I was drinking and drugs and all stuff, blah, 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 blah. But I got into, long story short, I got into comedy to kind of find myself and be authentic. And my favorite comedians are people like Patrice O'Neill, people like Carlin, people like, Bill Hicks, even though they're not always funny. You watch their sets, sometimes it's not funny. A lot of the times you watch their sets and it's like serious music because they're trying to make a point. But I think that that's like the most, I love that. I just like honest, like whether it hurts, whether it's someone like really digging you, like that thing makes me laugh the hardest, when someone makes fun of me and it hurts a little bit.
Yeah.
Because it's honest, it's true. And I think that that's the type of comedy that heals. I'm very lovey-dovey about that. So as far as stand-up goes, I don't think that I could not talk about what I think. With that being said, it's, I do get, there's a very like tight, it's a very thin line between people thinking you're funny and people being like, all right, man, like sometimes people don't want to hear your opinion. I get a lot of shut up. Like, I thought you were supposed to be a comedian.
Wow.
Not like people mad, not necessarily when I'm on stage.
Right.
But definitely the podcast, definitely some of the stuff I put up online. People are like, I came here for comedy. I don't want to hear that. But it's also like, well, I do comedy to make people laugh, but I also do it to be, it's an art. Like, so it's tough. New York, there's certain, I find that, and I don't know if it's like this in Canada, but I find that, certain cities are segregated. Like, we have clubs in Brooklyn, New York, and that seems to be the place where you talk about how bad Columbus is, and they have all vaccinated shows and all like, it's very like, and then there are places like Astoria, and I feel like the higher up, the better comedy clubs you're in, people don't care about anything. They don't care what your opinion is, as long as what you're saying is funny.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a tightrope act, especially when you're newer and you're trying to get booked, because everything again has become so emotional and political that like people, they might see a joke that you did. I have jokes that I don't like that are about Biden. Like one of the jokes I do is about how, because initially it was college tuition and healthcare and minimum wage and we're going to change the immigration, we're going to police reform and all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, we asked for that. And he's like, okay, well, you can have weed. All right, but what about the minimum wage? And he's like, all right, you can do mushrooms too. And then it's like, all right, but what about the police reform? It's like, fine, you can do heroin in Portland if you just stop. And that's pretty much what happened. Is that they just give you drugs, and it's like, all right, fine, but nothing got done. And there are people who are like, they don't like that because it's like Biden's the savior. And so, but much like you said at the beginning up top that comedy is a place where people can kind of say what they want. And I do think that you're supposed to be funny, and I do think that I struggle with that sometimes because I am a very opinionated person. It's also the reason I got into comedy, is because I feel like I have no interest in talking about how long a bank line is. As funny as it can be, like that's not why I feel like I need a microphone.
Yeah.
So while COVID is going on, and while things don't make sense, which excites me, I think that, and this might sound a little like egotistical or grandiose, and I don't know if I think of myself in this way, but it's like someone needs to say something, right? Like there needs to be conversations where people are like, hey, this doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Like do whatever you want with that information. I'm never here to tell people what to think, but I will give you information that does not make sense and say it doesn't make sense. And it's like, what you do with that after I bring it up is that's on you.
So you
yeah.
have a podcast that you appear on. Is it yours? I've never asked. Like, it's the 69th Amendment. Is that correct?
That's both mine. Yeah.
Okay. And that is obviously a little bit more along the political side of things. Your clips for Scott Hall show, like they are so fucking funny, dude. They are on fire. And I know what it's like, the YouTube world, and everyone's fighting for attention, and it's really difficult to get attention sometimes. Your clips, especially the stuff that you do, the raw comedy where you're out there with the mic, just wherever it is, out and about, that is some of the funniest stuff. I mean, it's just as good as anything else that is out there. And I love that. It kills me. I mean, honestly, I share them with friends. I'm like, this guy, you're fire. And do you find that is your best brand of comedy? And is that something that you've been doing that's new? Like as far as going out and about like that? I don't remember seeing as much of it when you were
in DC.
Yeah.
I started comedy as like a crowd work guy. I bartended. I told you I'd been in the restaurant business my whole life. So talking to strangers is pretty much all I've done. I love it. And I'm again curious. I like, so I did crowd work a lot in DC, and but I was also doing shows. So I was getting booked a lot more because I started there. So I had big audiences to talk to. I got to New York, and it's like, people are like, oh, we don't care. Like I went from being a big fish in a small pond to like, okay, well now so I have to have audiences to talk to. I can't get that in an open mic. And also I feel like it's a kind of a comedic dream just to take a microphone and a speaker and go out to Central Park and just talk. Like just, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was one of the things I knew I wanted to do when I got to New York, was just to stand up in Central Park. And funny enough, I actually met George Wallace while I was out there doing that.
Badass.
He just happened to be walking around. He looked like he was wearing a George Wallace Halloween costume, and he had on like a purple, like a purple blazer, like leather blazer. It was hot outside, and a Kangol. I was like, okay, like we get it. But to be standing there and have like a legend walk up and be like, dude, and it was me and a couple buddies, and for him to be like, it doesn't get any harder than this, and if you can do this, like, that's it. That was pretty awesome. But I mean, how much I like comedy because it's raw. How much, like, it doesn't get any more raw than going out and talking to people, like just anybody walking by. I had a religious guy tell me that it's on TikTok on Scott Hall Comedy, but I had a religious guy, got 1 million views. He was explaining to me for 20 minutes. He talked to me. I didn't put the 20 minutes up,
obviously,
but he was explaining to me how eggs. He's a vegan, and he was saying eating eggs is unnatural, the same way that licking a woman's vagina is unnatural. And they're the exact same thing. And it's like, where else am I going to meet anybody? Like, that's not going to happen.
Right. I
had like an 80-year-old lady tell me she used to do Quaaludes. Like just walking by. She's like literally fast walking by, and I was like, I used to do drugs. She's like, yeah, me too. And I was like, what kind? She's like, Quaaludes. And I was like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Like, isn't that not like, that's like what life is like? It doesn't get any better than that, just connecting with a stranger on nothing. And also I've had people to tell me I'm horrible and nobody's laughing and I should shut up and get out of the way. I get a lot of that too, but that's just as fun.
And how do you feel comedy has shaped you as a person? Because I mean, that has to change you. Number one, you have to be a unique type of person to want to do it. I know people in comedy. I have a tremendous amount of respect for comedy. I go to comedy festivals just for laughs in Montreal every year. Like,
who's your favorite comedian? Can I ask? Or do you? Top few.
Top few. Okay, I do. If I have to go,
say
old
Bill
school,
Cosby.
I love.
Just say Bill Cosby. Just say it.
I love Carlin. I
Yeah,
think
of course.
Carlin is genius.
I got two
I
Carlin books right there.
all right there. I do love Chappelle. Eddie Murphy. I think for his time and for my type of comedy, like he's the GOAT for me. And then
Yeah,
of course I have respect for the Richard Pryors. I
of
love
course.
Rodney Dangerfield.
Yeah, his
He's
story
another
is amazing
good
too.
guy. Yeah, I mean, Bill Burr would be,
Of
one more
course,
modern day. And then if I have to give one more out there, it would be Johnny Carr. I
Johnny. Okay, yeah, yeah,
Is
yeah.
that his name?
British
Is it?
Jimmy
Yes,
Carr.
Jimmy Carr. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I actually had a really nice conversation in Montreal. It's the funny thing about comedy, and I really do have a strong appreciation for what you do. It's kind of like some people just watch movies and some people are into cinema. I'm a cinema
Yeah,
guy. And so it's
yeah.
not just the jokes. I love the way that you guys put together the jokes, your timing, the punchline, everything. And where the fuck was I going with this? Oh, in Montreal, it's amazing how some of the most famous comedians on the face of the planet can just walk the streets and people
Mhm.
don't know who they are.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? And if it's the most gratifying thing. If and if you're in that group, you can
yeah.
pull them aside and say like, hey, and have a great conversation. And Jimmy Carr is one of the best conversations that I've had with a comedian. He actually got pulled away from me, from his PR person, but he was genuinely really interested about what I thought, about the comedy there.
Oh, I love that. I like to hear that too. It's always. I was hoping you weren't going to say he was a dick.
No, he was great. Every
Yeah,
comedian I've met so far has been great.
that makes me very excited. Yeah, I think I've had conversations. I was lucky enough to start the podcast and be decent at it, like when I first started. So and I started the podcast before, but I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of older comedians initially.
Mm-hmm.
And they all say the same thing, like, you don't even know who you are yet. Like, you get that a lot. Like,
Yeah.
you're a baby, like you don't even know, like, because they're all 12, 13 years in, like, you 3-4 years in, you don't know shit. And you think you do. But on a more like how it's changed me, I think that when they say you don't know anything, it's not just about comedy. Like, I really think, and the reason I like Patrice and I think Carlin and all these people are very, and Gary Shandling too,
Oh yes, yeah.
are very, and Norm, who I cried when he passed. I cried like a baby.
Mm-hmm.
They're really honest explorations of like who you are. And I know that Chris D'Elia is persona non grata now, but he was explaining one time on a podcast how doing stand up is like a superpower. And how, like, if you go up 3-4 times a week, sometimes 2-3 times a night, in the city, and you tell a group of people your real opinions and they hate it. And they couldn't, like, they hate you, they don't want to hear you talk,
Yeah.
they're mad that you're talking the entire time that you're talking, and you have to stand there and tell them things that you thought that they were going to like, and then you have to go home and sit on that. Everything else in your life becomes so much easier. It's just,
Yeah.
it is like having a superpower. Like, I could trip and fall in Starbucks and like drop everything. I wouldn't care. I'd be like, I would laugh.
Yeah.
I would laugh because I know what it's just, and I think I got a lot of that from comedy. And also, which I think is important, is that I think everybody needs a thing that they care about more than whatever's like more than their, I'm going to wake up, make the money, pay the bills, go to bed. They need something like a purpose, I guess, without getting too like whatever. And I know you had David Weiss on. I know this is like maybe a little bit of
Yeah, no, and
deviation.
let's just say that David Weiss is a flat earther. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah. I was about to say, yeah.
Right. And so Scott had him on the show and he
Yeah.
did a fantastic job with them and just heard him out. And actually, you were the inspiration for how I handled that podcast as well.
Nice.
So thank you. So continue. Sorry about that.
Yeah. I got a lot of love from his people and stuff.
Mhm.
But what I got from the conversation with him, regardless of, outside of all the flat earth stuff, is I feel like, because he was a very nice guy.
Yes.
And I feel like he found something that was bigger than him, that allowed him to be, for whatever reason. And I think that, the COVID stuff, I think once you start saying things that people don't necessarily agree with, and I feel like in comedy, you presenting your real self is something a lot of people don't do until they're like 40, 50 years old. Maybe their parents have passed. Maybe they have moved on from friends that had expectations of who they should be. I found that David Weiss probably found that from telling people the earth is flat,
Mhm.
that he realized maybe it doesn't matter so much what other people think. And I think that having a bigger, like something that's bigger than you, gives you that a little bit. And I feel like I found that through comedy of it's okay to be me. It's okay to be myself. And I think that people find it in different ways. I think that a integral part of that is realizing that people are going to dislike you. Not everybody's going to like you, especially now in social media. I think it's very important to realize that, that like, it's okay. It's all right to be yourself. Not, it's a giant world. And I think that comedy really gave me that. I think that a purpose and something bigger than myself, and being able to like actually examine myself, and really the comfortability of I don't know when you started the podcast or how long you've been doing it. I think you were in radio before, right? Yeah. So I mean, maybe this is not I don't know. When you first started, I'm sure it was horrifying to put your real opinions and just to speak openly. It's terrifying.
Yeah, it's still terrifying.
Yeah, but once you get,
yeah,
don't you? It is terrifying.
Yeah, it
but
is,
not
especially
always.
this stuff. Like, know what I mean? I'm taking hits, dude. Like, there's no doubt about it. Doing my podcast, and
doesn't the good outweigh the bad so much? Like when you get people
it does, but it's like, it's heavy, dude. It's hard to explain to someone that isn't dealing with a mandate. It doesn't seem like it's a lot, but it's just like this fucking dark cloud. You're just constantly being reminded that the world is different for you. And I looked through my episodes, like I'm thinking, am I just doing too much COVID stuff? I thought to myself, right? And I took a look through, and I mean, a lot of things fall under that umbrella. Like I dealt with alcoholism and PTSD, but overall, like maybe I've done 3-4 shows exclusively on COVID, but it feels, based on the response and the heat that I get from some people, like that's all I do. I made a post saying that I'm going to have a gentleman named Greg Hill on my show. I haven't even fucking spoken to this dude.
Yeah.
And, it's a meme of a pilot who says, he believes in his God-given rights and he doesn't believe in mandates. And he served 3 tours in Afghanistan and has over 13,000 flight hours. Like, this is a guy that is responsible enough to fly, and do tours for the armed forces, not to mention to transport human bodies from one place to another, like in the cockpit,
just on a
human level.
Yeah.
And then because you disagree with the fact that he doesn't like mandates and he believes in it strongly enough that he leaves this position, that people are calling him an idiot and he's stupid. Like, this is a couple of weeks after Remembrance Day, November 11th. And I mean, at the very least, him just being a veteran that you just can't give enough grace to just say, you know what, we're just going to agree to disagree. Yeah. Or just scroll on by. I'm just saying he's going to be on my show. If you don't want to watch, like, just don't tune in.
What happens? People send you messages, this, that. People talk to you in your life. And also, can I just ask you a question? At what point do you? I mean, you can do. I want to hear the answer to both, really. But at what point are you going to budge on getting the jab?
I'll get around to that. I don't like being told that I'm sharing misinformation. I'm not sharing misinformation.
Yeah.
I'm sharing some information that you disagree with. There's a lot of stuff that I could see you post that I think is misinformation. I know it is. I've looked at it and it's not true.
Absolutely.
Right. And unfortunately, you can write whatever you want on Facebook about anything that is pro narrative. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, you know what? Take the vaccine.
And no one says anything.
You know what? You can grow a second penis. And like, like, that's great. I want a second penis too. Like, know what I mean? It'll give you longer lasting erections. And people, you can post that all you want. But, you say anything that, I mean, that is factual from something else that generally the mainstream doesn't know. And now I'm sharing misinformation, or I'm dangerous because now I'm allowing a platform for somebody else to speak. I got that with David Weiss. People said that's dangerous.
Man,
I'm like, what do you mean it's dangerous? And he's like, well, other people might believe in flat earth. I'm like, yeah, okay, and then what?
Oh,
who gives a shit?
So whatever, dude. I go. These people are like, they ask me the same. Why would you have him on? And I go, because he believes in the flat earth. What do you mean? Why would I not want to talk to that guy? What are you crazy? Like, what life do you? Of course, I'm going to listen to him.
Yes, and like you said,
I mean, I'm going to like take notes and then go preach.
Right. He's just a super guy. He's a super guy.
Why not?
And I said the same thing too. Like, I'm going to lead an army of flat earthers. Like, get the fuck out of here. And in regards to changing my mind, I don't know. I don't know. I'm open. I'd still be within, the hesitant range. And I don't want that to be a reflection or project that onto anybody else. Listen, if you think you need to go out there and get vaccinated for whatever reason, I don't give a shit. Even though I believe, okay, I'll just my believies is that as long as the person that you're around is vaccinated, it doesn't matter what you do. But if you feel the need that you need to get vaccinated so you don't hurt grandma that's vaccinated, then go do it. I'll drive you to the appointment. I would never tell someone not to get vaccinated because that's not my place.
I would also encourage like my mom and my dad, they're in their late. I mean, and again, there's reasons not to do that that I know. But if once you're vaccinated, there's a 99.8% chance that you're not going to end up in the hospital. Fine. All the other stuff, I'm going to be very honest that I haven't gone into like as far as like effects, vaccine, all this other stuff for people that are in that age range that has a higher issues with it. But yeah, for someone like you who's clearly in shape, right? As you said earlier,
what's that, bro? Sorry, I got a scratch back here.
But isn't it known? This is where isn't it known that you're getting the vaccine not to prevent transmission or not to catch, just to keep yourself out of the hospital, right?
Right.
So then I don't.
Yeah.
That's where.
You know what, dude? I just want to be able to make my choice and not have to suffer consequences for it outside of the fact that I just might put myself at greater risk. Right? That's it. If I'm in a room of 20 vaccinated people, I'm not a danger to them. I am the one that's more likely to be in danger because I'm not vaccinated. Correct. I'm willing to say that, right? Like, so I want everyone to be able to make their choice and be happy with that choice. And for me to go out and tell other people that they shouldn't have that choice or don't do A, B, C, or D, then I can't be upset or frustrated with the fact that people are trying to navigate me down a road that I don't necessarily want to go. Let's just let one another do what we want to do. Again, I'm not as familiar with the landscape in the United States, although it seems that if you're within, the red demographic, you're probably less likely to be vaccinated, I guess. And if you're in the blue demographic, you're likely more. Is that how it works there?
Yeah. I will tell you something that shocks most people in New York. And the thing I'm very against identity politics, and I think it's an awful way to just to put people in categories. But just as a thought experiment for some of the people who do believe that, which is generally people, like I said, I'll have a lady come explain to me, and she'll be like, oh, these white men on the train, I just can't believe they won't get vaccinated, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, in New York City, 70 to 80% of the people that aren't vaccinated are African-American or minority.
Yeah, that's right.
It is not a majority like white Republican thing. And there are valid reasons for that. Aside from like people who don't understand the Tuskegee experiments that went on for like 30, 40 years.
Yes.
And all these other things. And people say that, and it's like, okay, well, is a 20-year-old going to know about that? Maybe, maybe not. Depends on their family.
They don't. Where blacks were basically given syphilis.
Yeah.
For 4 decades.
And they were told they were getting treated for it, and they were not. They were getting placebos.
Right.
So there's that, but also just let's say on a basic level, right? I don't know what makes those groups. I'm not here to like analyze any type of group of people. I'm not going to do that. But if you are in those groups, maybe I think you are likely to be of a income, right? A lower income, and percentage wise, and even I think maybe this breaks down on an income level thing too. The one thing I just want to say is like, I know I'm like rambling, but my point is that one of the options, that the reasons that it could be that is because people, when you get a shot, right? If you look at the facts and you're like, oh, I'm gonna have a 99% chance of not going to the hospital, not getting sick. But if I get this vaccination, I could end up into the emergency room. I've had people on my podcast. That means I might have to take time off of work. Right. That means I might have to, and people cannot afford to do these types of things. Some people can't afford to have daycare. Some people just don't. They look at the two risks. They look at the amount of time. They look at this. They look at that. And they make the decision for them that makes the most sense at the time. and that is being completely ignored. And it's just, that's hard to me. I just want to point out that because people are like, oh, well, they're not getting it because there's some microchip, or they're not going to, the vaccine's not going to kill you. And it's like, it might be as simple as they don't want to end up in the emergency room for like 2-3 weeks.
Right.
For whatever reason.
Yeah. I try not to put too much judgment on what people do. I mean, I definitely have my thoughts. And I'll share those thoughts with people that are like-minded individuals. I don't go vomiting them on other people. The one thing that I do preach, and you had spoken to this in regards to the message from a lot of media, which is like, that this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. And, Bill Gates had come out not that long ago saying like, these vaccines aren't necessarily the best in regards to reducing transmission. They're very good for, someone's own personal health. Right. And I've been sharing that quite a bit, is just to let's dispel this myth that this is just an unvaccinated problem, and that everyone plays a role right now. And when we used to say, we're all in this together, we still are. And regardless what the narrative might be out there, we're all in this together. And I think it's really important that we remember that. And I'm definitely, if I had to label myself one thing, it would be I'm anti-mandate. And unfortunately, the mandates seem to fall underneath that umbrella, obviously, of getting a jab, right? And I see them as being, not necessarily two completely sovereign things, but they are different. And I think we just need to find, a better way, if that's, what I'm going to say in regards to closing, because we've been going for a good time.
I know. I've been rambling.
No, you've been doing fantastic, and you were the right person for this conversation. I honestly didn't know we were going to agree as much, even though we are kind of on different sides of the spectrums. Pardon me, sorry?
You want to argue? I'll argue if you want.
You're a dick.
Yeah.
I guess if anything, it just maybe to do a little bit better, to kind of live life as a comedy. Make the world a better place.
Yeah. I think the same thing you do. I think at the end of the day, we should just, my whole goal, and I know that I have a lot of theories, and I go on tangents, but that's just because I have a lot of stuff in my head, and it's very concerning to me that people we're losing like a sense of humanity. That is that, like, we are all in this together. It's very scary to me that we can look at it, but like, you're looking at someone with no information, and you're like, oh, this thing is their fault. And it's this like global thing, and it's being put in your face. It's just very scary to me, the future of the division, and how fast it's happening, and how clear people are drawing lines and dismissing their friends and family and all this other stuff over things that none of us have 100% of the information on. A very few select people know like everything. Correct. And that's just the fact, and that's about almost anything. I just think everyone should love everybody, start there. Start there. You know what I mean? Like,
this podcast this is going to shit. This is no good. This isn't divisive.
I hate you. You're fat.
Yeah.
You're fat. How about that?
Yeah, you're not strong enough, bro. You need to lift more.
Yeah.
So Scott, thank you very much. Scott Hall, comedian, 69th Amendment, also the Scott Hall Show. You should check out both. I'm going to make sure it's in the description. Where else can people find you, brother?
Just find me on Instagram. I got a couple shows coming up in New York. Just find me on IG, Scott Hall Stand Up. I put everything there.
All right, brother. Thank you once again for being on the show. And thank you for watching yet another edition of the Launchpad podcast. If you enjoyed the content, you're still here, give it a like, a subscribe would also be greatly appreciated. And I'm going to make sure to have all your links there, buddy, so they can do the exact same for you. You deserve it. His shit is fire. You got to make sure to check it out. You take care, be well. Love simply because you can.